Hey folks, welcome to Thru Port Collective. And I'm Cryss, and this is Marshall and Tim, my partners in crime, and the three of us like to hang out and talk about making music. And we like to talk about gear too, but we always try to focus our discussions on something that is going to help us to become better musicians. And I really learn a lot from these two guys, and from everybody in the chat as well. So welcome. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, so we missed last week as it was kind of the perfect storm of everything happening. Hey, let me find out how you guys are doing. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Last week was my second dance with COVID for this year, and hopefully my final. But it wasn't terrible, and it was enough to take me down for a few days or so. But last Wednesday I was not really in any shape to be able to do the show, unfortunately. But I'm much better, man. Thank you. Life is good. I feel good to be able to have some energy back and back to getting some things done, even though I pretty much missed a week of scheduling, So, but I'm just happy to be rallied.
That's some of the hard part of it. I mean, you go through the sickness of it, and then you have to make up for the sickness after you're still not feeling that great.
Yeah, right. Trying to do double time after that. Yeah.
How you been, Marshall?
Oh, I'm good. Just been busy. So glad to have the show back this week, and glad Tim's doing better.
Yeah. Have you had any time for anything musical this week?
Oh yeah, I've still been doing my live rig thing. I know I say that like pretty much every week, but it's getting there. So
nice. Well, I said week's been kind of crazy for me last couple of weeks, but hoping things are smoothing out now. I forced some chaos on myself for a couple days, and I went ahead and upgraded to macOS Ventura because I don't I don't get paid for mixing, although sometimes I get paid to do other stuff in the with my computer. So but I felt like I could deal with it, and so upgrade. Actually, everything's been fine, but for like a couple days, anything that I had that was iLock would not load at all, and it couldn't find some component or something. I'm like, well, this kind of sucks. So I was like, well, I knew I was getting into, but I figured that this update wouldn't be such a big deal. I mean, the big thing was them changing the architecture, so going from Intel to the M1 architecture, and that was a big change for a lot of developers, but yearly things like this are usually not such a big deal. But I had a problem for a couple of days and kind of poked around until I think I figured it out and got everything back working today. So got to have a little time this afternoon to play and demo some stuff and have a good time making music. So, yeah, that's probably been about it for me. Well, we've got a really great topic about typecasting gear, but we'll hold off on that for just a little bit as we talk about a little bit of the stuff that's coming out and some things that interest us. We don't talk about gear releases every week, but when there are things that are fun or that we find interesting, then we want to bring them on. So we got a few of them. Which ones do you guys want to? What do you want to start with, guys?
Did you get the Moog pedals?
Yeah, Moog pedals, Strymon Big Sky plugin, and the Arturia Mini Freak, and whatever else you guys want to talk about.
But did you purchase them?
Oh no, they're not purchased yet, but I demoed them.
Nice. Well, let's talk about them. Have you had a chance to goof with them at all?
Yeah, I have. Actually, let me get this up on the screen. Okay, yeah, there we go. So, I think that's up there. Yeah. All right, so we're just on the Synth Anatomy website, which is great for gear news. Tom writes some good articles. So this week, Moog released a set of plugins that emulate their classic Mooger Foger plugin, or pedals, Which when did they come out? I know I had the phase shifter in like probably 15 years ago at least. I mean, they came out quite a while ago, right?
Yeah, I want to say early 2000s.
Yeah. So they have a set of these. Let me see what they are here again. Low pass filter, a ring modulator, a phase shifter, analog delay, the MRF, and let's see, cluster flux, and freak box. And so these all come together. I think the normal price is $249, but they're on sale right now for $149. So I got to play around and demo some of these, and they're pretty fun. Have you guys checked them out, or what have you guys seen about them?
I don't know much about the Moger Fogers. Like I know that they are beloved, but I've not ever seen one in real life, and yeah, I don't know much about them. So, kind of in the dark on this one a little bit.
So the Moger Fogers were analog pedals made by Moog. They're huge. I mean, they're like probably this big. I don't know if that helps as a comparison. What was that? Like maybe 10 or 12 inches long. And so they're like this very luxurious looking piece of hardware, wood sides, big knobs on them. And they're really great sounding too. They had good design circuits, real analog stuff. Like I said, they were pretty expensive. At one point I had the phase shifter, and I don't remember if I had any of the other ones. I don't think so. But the phase shifter was great sounding. I used it with guitar, but when you're talking a pedal that's that big, it was a little bit hard to keep it on the pedal board as it took up so much space. But I would say I learned about them in the guitar world, and guitarists really love them. The analog delay and the ring modulator and the phase shifter, probably those are being the most popular amongst guitarists. But I guess,
when
what's that?
I was just pulling these up. So it looks like they were released in the late 90s. At least some of them were.
Yeah.
98, 99.
Maybe the delay, the Moger Foger delay.
So that looks like the analog low pass filter, the MF101, MF102, 103. But like I said, I don't know much about these.
Well, I got a chance to when I was at Moog last in Asheville. They had one. They had just a Moger Foger, just the delay out. Mm-hmm. So that's the MF101 or whatever. It was the actual piece of hardware. It was right before the pandemic, and it immediately. Let's see, what were they running through it? I think just a subsequent 37 was going through it, and it immediately just was dripping with all this character. The sound of that analog delay was so good that it's just immediately inspiring. I mean, it was so cool just right away, because I didn't really think that I was going to have that reaction. Yeah. I mean, it's a delay, cool, right? But it just had this complete thing that just was captivating, and just from editing on it for a second, it was like, oh, I'd love to have this. And it was like it was just out for display. In fact, it wasn't for sale. They had already discontinued them at that point. I think the last chance any of us had to buy the actual hardware, they were going for $1,000 a piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that just was a little bit, I couldn't quite justify it. But I will say, what an amazing sounding pedal that was.
Yeah, sorry, the delay one is the MF104. So that's the one you had too?
That's the one I got a chance to goof with, in person at Moog. But then I had a couple of, somebody had, well, way back in the day, somebody had cracked the code on some different plugins, and so I was checking a few things out. Anytime I had ever done that in the past, I've always gone and bought something if I loved it. But I had the delay, the Moger Foger delay that someone else was making at that time, and I can't remember who made it. So this would have been 2010,
Yeah.
2011.
You're talking in plug-in form?
Yes.
Or, Bomb Factory.
Bomb Factory, that's who it was. That's right. Yeah. And so I did have that, and I used it a lot. I used it a whole lot. And then it was after that that I actually heard the hardware piece, which was just, to me, mind-blowing for a delay.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel the same way about how the analog delay in Matriarch sounds. It's captivating to me. It's so good. It really takes the tone somewhere. It really does an amazing thing. But yeah, I'm not familiar with these exact ones, and at 149 and with my kind of love for them already, I'm tempted I'll probably jump in and get the whole collection there.
Yeah, Moog really does analog delay pretty well. I agree with you. The Matriarch sounds amazing. I love that it's a stereo analog delay, and getting some ping pong going with that is just amazing. The other one that they did that I think is probably their best sounding delay, but the prices on them now are astronomical, is their 500 series analog delay.
Oh yeah,
man, I wish I had a stereo pair of them. And I mean, there was a time where I had a lot of different analog delays. I went through a lot of them. There's one that most people, well, in the guitar world, they're more well known, but the Tone Czar, Echo Czar, which was this like very premium. I mean, it was the most expensive pedal I'd ever purchased at that point, and maybe still, I don't know, but it was kind of, that high grade analog delay, and back 15, 20 years ago, when really the only analog delays you could get were vintage ones, and usually vintage ones didn't have that long of a delay time. I mean, most of them were around 300 milliseconds, which is just not enough. I think the exception being is I had a late 70s Electro Harmonix Deluxe Memory Man that I had tweaked. I had calibrated it, and then I had tweaked out the the clock on it, and I got it out to probably about 600 milliseconds, and I thought that was just incredible until I got the Echo Czar, and I could do 1100 milliseconds of analog delay, and that was just blowing my mind. But of course now that's not uncommon, because a lot of these chips are being made again, or copies of them by whatever Cool Audio and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And Paul, Uncle Chrome there, Paul Artola says originally they were about $350 to $500 new, the actual hardware pedals. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's right. I remember them being like $399 or something when they first came out.
Yeah, and that I mean, we've gotten a little desensitized about that because the boutique stuff has really taken off. But that was a small fortune back in the day for a pedal. I mean, it still is.
Absolutely. And yeah, but like $1999. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, getting a Echo Czar in like whatever 2005 or 6 or something, that was like almost $700, and I was just like, I couldn't believe it. To me, that was like I was buying a pretty decent amp, but it's only a pedal. The other thing about these too was that they had CV control on the pedals, which is not such a common thing. And so with the back of the pedals, let's see if they have a picture of it on here. I'm not sure.
So while you're looking for that, I just did the conversion. $1,999, $399 to today, it would be $663. So, yeah.
Yeah. But they had the CV stuff on there, and so of course a lot of synth players will integrate the CV, but so what do you do with a plugin? Well, they've integrated the CV on the plugins as well, and so if you click the CV button, a panel drops down and you can see what would be the back of the physical pedal with all the CV controls, and then whatever of these Moger Fogers are in your session, you can then select another pedal and use the CV out from that to modulate another pedal. So I just before the show, I had like a really crazy patch where I was playing. It was an Arturia CS80, and I was going into the ring modulator, and then I was going into the analog delay and cluster flux. But with the analog delay, it also having a few more options than the original did. So it had a ping pong that you can set up, and it's got another panel where you can adjust some functionality that the hardware doesn't have, like the phase of the outputs and things like that. So I set the analog delay into ping pong. It's also got the original legacy really dark mode, because to get the analog delay to be so long, they have to filter a lot of the top end, because you get that aliasing, the ringing in there, the clock whine. And so it was a really dark sounding analog delay. With this, though, because it's digital, they have another setting which gives you a little brighter analog delay sound, maybe more like a deluxe Memory Man. And so I had that going, and then routed, I think I was using the, what's it called? The Freak Box. And I used the LFO on the Freak Box and ran it into the CV of the time on the analog delay, and then I was running that at audio rates, and it was freaking out and doing crazy stuff. And at one point I actually crashed Logic by chaining a bunch of stuff together. But yeah, they sound good though. Like I said, it's been at least 15 years since I had the phaser, and it sounds basically like I remember it. And some of the other pedals that I didn't have, like the ring modulator, is really cool. So I've had these on demo, but I think, I'm with you, Tim, that this is going to be a purchase for me.
I'm a little confused, though, why they didn't do hardware versions of these as well. I think definitely a market for that still as well, and they could have released them at the same time, I think, or,
let me look up something here. Yeah, there we go. So I think they've lost some of their the engineers that did these pedals, and so this company, AMT, as I understand it, I'd have to look this up again. So, if I get the information wrong, these guys, and here, let's check out the about. I don't know if I don't really want to read that big long block of text, but we could probably find
these
out about.
These guys kind of make like a clone kind of thing of these.
They were at least one of the people, from what I recall, because I had read about this, that they were one or more of the engineers that designed the pedals, and that they started their own company afterwards. So this analog delay is basically, it's very close to the Mogerfoger analog delay, except it's way cheaper. I mean, $347.
Weren't the Mogerfogers made before Moog had the name Moog back?
Yeah, they were with Big Briar.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
I remember reading something about that when I was going through a whole history of Moog thing a while back, and yeah, so this was right before they came back and did the Voyager then. I think
that could be the phaser I had was Moog labeled, as most of them I've seen are, at least. But yeah, these so like this one here, they're talking like up to 700 milliseconds, and I've seen variations of their analog delay that have gone up to about 1100 milliseconds. I don't really need that long of a delay time, but just that they're able to do some of this stuff. But this pedal would kind of do that sound, and it's got all the basic functions. It doesn't look like it has the CV stuff, but if you just need that analog drive circuit, the LFO to modulate the delay time, stuff like that, in a much smaller package, this is great.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
All right. Well, how about, should we talk about the Big Sky?
Moving on to the Big Sky.
Okay, we got the screen up, so we'll just go right over. So, also, I'm sure most people have heard all this news, but it's kind of fun to talk about that Strymon has finally released a plugin. So, of course, they started with pedals and finally did some Eurorack stuff, and now they're doing plugins, which we've all been wondering for many years, like, why haven't they done a plugin? And here we go.
Yeah, but that's a lot of money for one plugin. Holy crap!
So right away, yeah, the first
say.
tank on it is like, wow, $199 for a reverb plugin. Like,
yeah.
Oh my God, they're proud of it.
I don't think I need it that bad.
I mean, I'm assuming that it has all the qualities that the Eurorack version and that the pedal has. I'm sure that they've done a great job of that. I just can't see it for $199 personally, and it's a beautiful sounding reverb that's super changeable and beautiful. But really?
Yeah, it's a chunk of change. I think they would have sold a ton more and actually made a lot more money if they had done it for maybe even like $149. I think there would have been a lot more people buying into it. But at $199,
I would have bought it.
Yeah,
100, 149, somewhere around there. I probably would have bought this because the Big Sky is pretty cool. I never had a hardware one, but there's so many synth demos of people putting this on there. But I would still love to have it. But I think I'll wait for a sale or something. And I got to spend $200 on it.
There you go. Did either of you guys check out the plugin, demo it?
No,
I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, $199. That's funny, guys. That's hilarious. I don't really have time to listen to your plugin now.
Yeah, I demoed it. Unfortunately, it's only a week-long demo, so it's already done. And I had a couple days where iLok wasn't working. By the way, one thing that I besides the price that I don't care for is that it's iLok, which I can deal with machine activations. I'm like, it's not too big of a deal for me to handle, but I won't do any dongle stuff, and the cloud stuff is a pain in the ass because it breaks your workflow up because it's got to load up and check and do all that stuff before it loads in.
Sign into it every session. It's like, oh my gosh.
So yeah, that's true. Yeah,
it's kind of a pain, and I don't like. Although ironically, it does it through the cloud activation, Big Sky.
So this is actually kind of an interesting thing. That Uncle Chrome puts up here. Virtual chip shortage. Now, it's tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but maybe that's part of the reason why these are all coming out as plugins now. In other words, the chip being an issue to get for hardware or more expensive now.
Marshall, absolutely. Yeah, man. Yeah. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that because that gives people a chance to get excited about those products when they can't provide the hardware versions.
And another revenue stream for the companies.
Absolutely. Yeah,
makes sense.
I think you're spot on with that.
Well, it seems like an area of the market that they should have probably started exploring a long time ago. I mean, I don't know if the thought was it'll interfere with our hardware sales. I happen to have the Big Sky because it used to be on my big guitar pedal board. But with synthesizers, I'm not really that concerned about hardware. Everything out of the DAW, and Valhalla has been probably my most used reverb stuff. And so I haven't really felt the need for it, but it seems like this would help out a lot of people because you have innumerable instances that you can use. You can use different settings on a whole bunch of different channels in your DAW project. You're not having to route out to hardware and go back in. It just keeps a much simpler setup. And to me, that's very attractive. In fact, I'm thinking about selling my Big Sky and then later on seeing if it goes on sale or something and grabbing the plugin. The algorithms are good. I like particularly the cloud one. I use the Hall a lot for guitar. some of their later spring reverb ones are a lot better. Like on the Volant, that spring reverb sounds really good, and I usually prefer that to the spring reverb in my old Fenders. So, but this has a couple cool algorithms that are not as common, like the chorale, which has like a vocal format to the reverb tails, and of course shimmer. The magneto is kind of like a Benson Echo-Rec kind of thing going on. Not exactly, but it has the multi-head repeat type things, and of course you can do some crazy stuff with non-linear. But as far as like the kind of normal algorithms, plate, hall and room, and spring and swell and stuff, like, I would just go to another plugin. It would kind of be more of the things that are on the right hand side of the plugin that would be, for me, the reason to buy it. But $199, that's kind of tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I would own that in a second because I'd love to have the convenience and repeatability of it and everything as a plugin. Absolutely, like no questions asked. But they just put it just far enough. I don't know. It just was immediately like a turnoff to me. Like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, you can buy the actual hardware one for almost, twice the price. $479 on Sweetwater anyway for Strymon Big Sky multi-dimensional reverb pedal.
Yeah,
So-
I picked mine up used.
Yeah.
For
Well,
like
let's pick used.
275 or something. I don't know. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, but then again, it's multiple instances. It's programmable. It's all so
Right.
many
It is
other things, but
for effects, especially in the DAW workflow. I definitely would prefer a plugin.
yeah, exactly, man. It would be so great to have, but
Yeah,
it's a
they're
little off-putting.
they're still kind of expensive used. Even $391, I think, is the cheapest on Reverb right now.
Mine
it's
has
kinda-
some little physical defects on the front, and I said I don't care about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine. The only problem that I've ever had with Strymon hardware is that on the one that I bought, this one used, again, like really cheap. It was, and the reason being is that the middle foot switch didn't activate all the time. And I said that's the only problem that I've ever had with a piece of Strymon gear. And so it was nice because I got it ridiculously cheap because it was, partially broken. I emailed Strymon and they were great. So I got for like, I don't know, $12 or something, a new foot switch. I just took the bottom off and installed it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a hell of a deal.
Yeah, that's an easy fix right there.
Yeah.
Simple soldering.
Well, I'm kind of curious to see, they've done it with the Big Sky now, and I'm sure everybody's waiting for, the timeline and the other plugins. What of their stuff would you guys like to most see in plugin form?
We're gonna have to just let you guys talk about that stuff. I don't know much about hardware effects companies, so yeah, I have no idea what else they make. Even I just know Big Sky because there's so many synth demos with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason I even know what it is.
Yeah. So, Chris, you mean like in general, like every company, or specifically?
No. Just for Strymon.
Just with
Of the
Strymon?
pedals that they already make, what of those algorithms would you like to see come into a plugin?
That's interesting. I really am not even hardly familiar with any of the other ones, so I'm kind of in Marshall's boat with that. I mean, Iridium looks cool, but I don't know. I don't really have that much experience with their pedals because I never quite did the pedals thing. I sort of stopped right before that was happening with synth players, so I didn't really get into that.
I've had probably most of their pedals at some point or another. I still have quite a few things, although I'm kind of getting ready to sell some hardware, so some of my Strymon stuff will probably be gone just because I don't need as much of it anymore. But the one that I would really like to see in plugin form would actually be the Deco. And the Decos, it's one of their smaller format pedals. It was just recently updated to V2, and it's a kind of a tape machine. So one side of it is like the tape saturation, and the other side is, depending on how you set it, of course, with the delay time, it could be flange, kind of chorus, on out to like kind of artificial double tracking sounds and delay. But the flanging is, the flanging on it is really amazing. I mean, it sounds like 60s, actual reel-to-reel tape flanging, which has not been done a whole lot in pedals or plugins. There's a few of them out there, but that's something that I wish I would have a better version of that in a plugin form.
That would be cool.
But as far as some of the other effects, I mean, I love the timeline. That was, probably my favorite pedal for a long time, and no pun intended. But as far as as a plugin, if it were to come out at $199, I would pass on it. Like, I don't really need it because we've got so many great other delays and reverbs and stuff. This one has a few algorithms that are pretty interesting that, like, if it came on sale, like, I would be really tempted to get it because their shimmer is really musical. And to me, it sounds a lot better than the Eventide shimmer. So, I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
I guess we can speculate that maybe they might do something for Black Friday.
That's what I'm hoping, although I don't know if it will, because imagine, here it's a month before Black Friday, and if everybody buys it at $199 and they drop it to
That's true.
$149 or even $179,
That's
people
true,
are going to
yeah.
lose their.
That's so true. So they
I'm
probably won't do that.
Yeah, I'm not expecting it, but I will be on the lookout for that if it does come down.
Great thing though. Wish I could have it. I just can't bring myself to spend the $199 for it.
Yeah. Let's say it sounds good, but it's 2022. Like, there's a lot of choices out in the market right now. All right. Well, what about the Mini Freak? So, I don't even. One of you guys want to introduce this one?
I mean, I don't really know what to introduce about it other than it was the Micro Freak, right? That is his predecessor, which I know had the capacitive keyboard rather than an actual. It's short keys, but it's still a keyboard on this one. I know it's about approximately double the oscillator power, I think, and I don't know what all. Everybody else has been talking about it all over the internet, so I have watched a few of their things, just the usual suspects.
Six voice polyphony, 22 oscillator modes. I mean, it's the Micro Freak on steroids in a way. The thing I hate about this is the biggest problem I have with this. They got those stupid touch pitch mod things. Don't put that on synths. Use actual wheels. Yeah, use wheels. Don't put those stupid strips on there. I hate that. I'll never buy this just because of that.
Why is it? Why the feeling? Why is that?
Because a wheel, you get actual tactile feedback from that wheel. There's resistance either in a spring or with a mod wheel. You can move it and have it stay. Those don't do that. There's nothing. They're just touchy things. It's the same thing on some of the Roland boutiques. They're awful. They are awful.
Touchy things. Well, like on my. And I'm with you. I'm not defending the strips. In fact, because sometimes when I'm down on the lower part of the keyboard, if I'm using my thumb on a bass note kind of thing or whatever, if there's a finger hanging over, it can hit quite easily one of those strips and activate it. Whereas to your point, if it's a wheel, that takes a certain amount of, commitment, and I'm moving this thing. But one finger hanging over for a second, and I've had it happen live a few times, and all of a sudden, modulation's coming out the yin yang, and it's embarrassing. It's like, wow.
This is a nice, looks like a nice upgrade to the Mini Freak, except that, and that's like an Achilles heel for me. I will never buy one because of that.
They did sort of drop that wheel or mod section there, whatever, the strips, down into sort of a well, which makes it look like it would take a little more intention.
Well, what that tells me is that they probably had room to just make it normal and put two wheels in there.
Oh, I'm sure, but they probably have. Certainly, they have some sort of performance reasons. Like I have this.
That's probably easier to manufacture, honestly.
So I can tell you the performance reasons why they did it, and it's because you can assign those to different functions and modulations. So instead of having a spring controlled like a pitch wheel where it comes back to center, these can both be used as continuous controllers, and you can kind of preset stuff, whether that be pitch and vibrato, or you assign it to filter or other modulations.
Yeah.
I agree about the feel, though.
I think if they're going to do a touchy thing on anything like this, they need to give you both. Like the V-Synth.
Yeah.
The V-Synths have the time trip pad, which is a touchy thing, but it's not in the way. It's kind of, you still have, well, I think on the V-Synth, it's got the stupid performance pitch bend combined, which is also terrible. But, give us at least both. Like, this is not good. I don't like that at all.
I mean, you can also, a lot of them, like on my Complete Control S61 keyboard by Native Instruments that I have, it strips. But they also, like, you can tap them and they'll hang in certain positions. So this does have some advantages depending on what you're using them for. And you can, being that this is just a soft controller, you can definitely assign them to different things. Mm-hmm. So you can just tap them in various places and instantly be somewhere else in the modulation or in whatever you're assigning to it, rather than having to go through a continuous bit to get to that point. You can just tap on the strip like 3/4 of the way up and instantly be somewhere.
Yeah.
So there are some like cool things, and then the pitch strip on it also, it springs back to the détente position, So I guess it just depends, but like,
I think the what's the key-step has the same thing, and
it does.
Totally worthless. It's worthless.
I just bought a second key step, and not because of that.
No, I know. I mean, there's other things about the key step that are cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that is.
I feel you, man. I get it. I really totally.
I don't know why
get
they
it,
keep doing. It's like mini keys and and no pitch bend wheels.
Right.
It's like, what the heck is going on here?
I think they also included both on the poly brute, but then to me they put them in the wrong order. They put the strips where you'd want to be able to do your pitch bending and all that kind of stuff, and they put the wheels up further where it made it harder.
They have it backwards. The V-Synth did it right. That's if you're gonna have a touchy thing, put it up, but keep your traditional pitch mod wheels in the regular spot.
Yeah.
And one thing I would say, like where wheels have, in my opinion, the disadvantage of all these type of controllers is that it seems the least intuitive to work both things together. Like if you're doing pitch bends and vibrato, which to me playing solos, that's a really important thing. It's like you bend up to a pitch, and then like on a guitar you bend to pitch, and then you add a little vibrato to it. And that gets a little bit more, I mean, you can get muscle memory for that, and surely all of us have to some extent, but it's not as natural and intuitive of an action. I think this would probably be a little bit better for that, but I think this is where like the Roland joystick or the Korg works actually a little bit better. And if I'm playing a solo, that's where it feels most natural, because I don't know what it is, but I don't have to like, it feels more of an awkward hand movement to be doing that with mod wheels versus the joystick where I'm bending and then I push into it a little bit for the vibrato, and it just seems like a very natural way to do it.
Yeah, I always liked the joystick that Korg had. That was kind of one of my favorite features of my of the early Korg synths that I had. I actually really liked that because you could hit the access differently and get a couple of effects happening at once. Whereas with wheels, if you're having to go one forward and one towards you, that's odd for sure. You're doing a weird motion, I suppose.
It's still better than this crap, though.
Well, I think it'd be nice to have a joystick, whether like a Roland or Korg or whatever, joystick for the main pitch function. So like pitch bend, up and down, and vibrato, and then actually have wheels like just north of that on the synth there to control your modulation options.
I could go for that. Yeah, if they had the best of both. Yeah.
That would be cool.
Because you can physically feel it without looking at it to see where the detent is, and it will stay there. Like OBX8, both of them just spring back to the neutral position.
Right.
And actually, the wheels that I hate the most are actually the Moog 1 wheels.
Really?
Yeah, they're heavy and they're slick, and it's hard to get to get a grip on them. Like versus say like the OB6, which has great wheels in my opinion. They move easy. They got the kind of rubbery grip on them, and so when I'm playing solos, it feels very natural. When I go to grab for the Moog 1 wheels, I feel like I'm just gonna like fly off of them because they're very slick. In fact, if somebody ever offers, they look great. They're very beautiful looking, but if anybody ever offers some aftermarket ones, I would totally buy them.
You just got to take your left hand and wear a rubber glove.
Yeah.
Then they won't feel.
See, and I'm already at a disadvantage because the fingerprints on my left hand are already worn off from guitar, so it's really slick for me.
That's amazing.
No, I mean, otherwise this thing's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like it. I like a lot of Arturia stuff. They got some curious design choices, but sound-wise, their stuff sounds great. It's a lot of functions built into the front panels of these. Got a matrix brute. Oh, it's back there, but that's epic, right? So,
yeah, I really like the sound of this unit, and I like what it appears to be capable of doing. And I just wish it had full-size keys. That would be my bigger thing. I get it, but
even with the mini keys, I would go for the mini keys if they put actual freaking wheels on this.
Well, for you, it's the wheels. For me, it's the keys.
Man, I can't get over it.
One thing I really like is that they went to 6 voices. I still would much rather have had 8, but 6 is a step up from the Micro Freak at 4 paraphonic, and that gives you some more options. And then with that second engine in there, really expands it. And the Micro Freak is crazy because it's this cheap feeling little piece of plastic with a weird keyboard on it. But the sounds on it are really great. They're fantastic. I've made some really great music with that thing, and I just I shouldn't like this as much as I do, but it works. And some of that's owed to Emily of Mutable Instruments.
Well, maybe we'll get a Mind Freak Max or something, and it'll actually have full size keys and real pitch mod wheels on it, and then everyone will be happy. Because the first one. I didn't want the first one at all because, again, no pitch mod wheels. And then on top of that, there was no real key bed. So, I mean, it had the little, I don't know if the capacitive touch thing, I just how am I supposed to know what I'm playing? I can't feel any, it's just like touching the table.
I mean, it just offers up a different approach, so they just went with it, right? I mean, they're banking on the fact that might be interesting enough to some people to have it more continuously variable in that way, I guess.
I just think that there's certain if you're going to make a synthesizer, there are certain controls that need to. They've been around for hundreds of years in pianos for a reason. You know what I mean? Just do that because it works really, really well.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think about the price point of $599?
Yeah, it's not without pitch mod wheels. No way. Otherwise, not too bad.
I think for features and sound quality, $599 is pretty. Yeah, it's in there. That's fine. That seems okay. I would do it.
Yeah.
Even with the short keys and the mini keys, but yeah.
Yeah, this looks great. I think if someone were buying a synth and they didn't have a synth collection, because we got options and plugins and everything like that. But if somebody was just like, I want to buy a synthesizer that does a number of things, I'd still say at the price point.
I would tell them to get a Microkorg or a JDXA instead of this thing, though.
No, I would tell them to get a Hydrosynth Explorer. that for the same
Right.
price. Because that sound engine will go far beyond, you know. Now, if that's your taste or not, that's again, that's up to you. But I think as far as like bang for your buck, the Explorer still has a full Hydrosynth engine. Oh, this is like the Wayne's World moment. We would never sell out.
I don't know. I mean, and the Hydrosynth is a cool synth. I really like it's like what it can do. It's very unique in that way. But if you compare that to like a Roland, I don't know. It's like the Roland stuff sounds better to me.
That kind of depends on what you do with it. That's the one thing with the Hydrosynth, and that I've seen with certain synthesizers. So, I mean, when you get something, like the OBX8, man, you just play it and it sounds good, but its range is limited. It does what it does, and that which it does is fantastic.
Yeah.
But it's kind of limited. I find that they're the synthesizers that have a very extended range that you hear a lot of bad demos on. You hear a lot of bad Moog 1 demos. You hear a lot of bad Hydrosynth demos. But the thing is, like, those synthesizers are able to sound really good, but you got to dial it in. And a lot of times people have a hard time going that extra mile to do it.
It's like, okay, so the problem with these synths, like the Moog 1 and the Hydrosynth, if you're getting a bad demo, it's because they're demoing bad patches. Like, it's not, I mean, they're both great synths if you get some good patches for them. It's almost like the whole FM thing, right? FM wouldn't have done anything, I don't think, had it not been for the amazing presets they programmed into like the DX7. So, and FM is really complicated. It's hard to like, wrap your brain around because things are modulating other things. It's kind of the same thing. You got to have good patches on these. You have a deep synth. You got to get some good bread and butter stuff that just is ear candy to everybody. That's what's going to sell your instrument. So,
well, and also there are different kinds of players too. Like for people that love synthesizers, there's at least two big categories. One would be the tinkerers, who like to get under the hood and do sound design, and who would love to and be happy to do that with the Hydrosynth and the Moog 1. And then there are the ones that really just want to have presets, tweak them a little bit, and go play.
Right.
And they're not that other style. So
I'd say 90-something% are probably the latter, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. And I'm both. I'm kind of a little bit of both. It just depends on how much time there is and what my objective is, and
and just what mood you're in too. Do you are you in the mood for some sound design? Sure.
Yeah. Do I got the time for it? Because I'm usually in the mood if I have the time. That's half the fun of owning an instrument like that. But yeah, so there's different reasons to own synths and why that synth becomes more successful or doesn't. I think like the Hydrosynth or like Moog 1,
And the problem is like a lot of shops don't have this stuff to demo. Like when I started getting into this stuff, you could go to like a Guitar Center and they had all the top stuff. I sat there, I played with V-synths and like whatever ions, whatever was out at the time in the mid 2000s, and that was amazing. You can't really do that at most places. I think there's some places here and there that maybe you'll walk in and they'll have some stuff, but I don't know. In my experience, over the last like 10, 15 years, like as you walk in, they got a bunch of MIDI controllers, and maybe they'll have like one synthesizer in there that's of any pedigree that you might want to take a look at, but you can't just walk in and play with these is what I'm saying. So you have to, a lot of people make decisions based on what's presented to them via YouTube and these demos.
So, or if you're lucky enough to have a buddy that happens to have one, you can play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, it would be a YouTube thing. And you're right, that's kind of a bummer because, I mean, I remember going in and playing on a Mini Moog. Well, it wasn't even with headphones on, and it was kind of in the back room of the big music store nearest to me. That was a big one. They did all the pro people and everything else, and I remember just playing on that Mini Moog and probably driving the entire place crazy, But I mean, I swear, if I played, anyway, yeah.
It's just crazy to me,
at least you can use headphones, for a synth. You can at least do that.
But it's crazy to me that these companies don't push to have some of their stuff in brick and mortar stores, because some of these things are really expensive. I mean, you think about like, and I know this isn't a one-to-one thing, right? But if you go and buy a car, you don't just like watch YouTube videos and then order it. You go to the place, you drive it, you see if you like it, and then what can we do to put you in this synthesizer today? That's the kind of thing they need to be doing.
I agree.
And I
it's
think
weird though, like sorry, the what is that? Because when I was looking at buying a Jeep, I was going to buy like just the CJ7, whatever, just a regular Jeep, right? And then what is I can't even remember now the name of what's the Carvana, that's it. So you buy that online, you
Right.
never drive it. You just find one and they'll actually deliver it to you on a truck, which is fantastic. But now it's yours. And there's a return policy time. There is. I mean, it's not like you're stuck with it, but at the same time, you are buying it without ever driving it.
To me,
That's so weird, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like house most expensive thing most people ever buy, then car, then synthesizer, probably like just like that.
So I mean, kind of going back to saying like, well, 90% are the preset players. That this is where it kind of works though, as far as selling online, is because as long as there are people that will demo what it does, I mean, you can figure out what the features are. You don't need to put your hands on for that.
Right.
And if you're just looking for presets, well, there are all sorts of people that are just doing demos of presets, so you can kind of hear how it sounds.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, for the 10%, then it's kind of frustrating because I can't see what I can get out of this synthesizer.
Right. Absolutely. And play a bit in the feel of the key bed, and I mean, and it goes on, like the list goes on.
There's some great synths out there that have just awful presets, and people judge the instrument based on what they hear. So if all the demos are done with just these like the Kyra is the best example I can think of this. Mm-hmm. It's one of the best sounding synths I've ever heard, but you have to do it yourself because the presets are garbage.
Yeah.
Almost all of them sound exactly the same, and the onboard effects on that thing are not super awesome, right? So, but unless you put the work in, you're not going to know that. You know what I mean? And so somebody just hearing something like that, they're going to be like, that's what they think. But I can't stress it enough to companies, like hire some good sound designers for your stuff and get them in the stores so people can actually go in and check them out. I mean,
and one of the things about the sound design that I find too often is that you play the presets and they're the showroom presets. Like, oh, this has 50 forms of modulation on it and it's going crazy and it's perfect for your next rave or whatever. And it's like, I would never use that. But there's not enough bread and butter patches. Like, you should have at least a section. Like, you need to split it up. You need to have some that show the capability of the synthesizer. Here's all the crazy stuff it can do. Okay, put that in a section, but then have another section these are real world sounds, like if you started playing in a band that you would actually be able to use,
Absolutely, right. Yeah.
Or I think it's stuff like the Quantum. The Quantum had it was known about for years before you could actually buy one. And I remember seeing it at, what's the big trade show over in Europe? The Synth Fest or what? I can't remember. Whatever the big synth show is over in Europe. And they'd bring it out once a year. And you're like, when are you guys going to actually put this out? But the presets on it, a lot of them are not super awesome either. But you can tell, especially based on like the synth engines they put into that thing, that you can get some amazing stuff. But I agree, if you're just going to focus on capability instead of sound, like there is a little bit of a balance there, right? Because you do want to show off some of the features that you can do with your instrument that can't be done on something else. But you also want to showcase that it actually sounds good, because sometimes just demoing the features with certain patches is not the ear candy that
it's funny. I mean, the OBX8 has some really great presets on there, and they've chosen some from the original sets that were great, and some of the new ones are good too. And so it has a range on there, and that's kind of surprise. It has a surprising number of good patches in it compared to a lot of other synthesizers that I've played. but it is shocking to find other synthesizers like the Prophet 6 and things like that, where you go and you play it and like, wow. I mean, did anybody ever like understand what a Prophet was about? This thing can sound really amazing, but I'm not really hearing a whole lot of stuff that I would want to use.
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, and I can't tell you how many times I've watched synth demos on YouTube, and somebody will say something to that effect in the comments, like, this doesn't sound good at all. But it's like, how do you really know unless you get your hands on it and tweak it and play with it yourself? You know what I mean? I don't know.
One of the surprise thing is to get one of these synthesizers that you take a little bit of a gamble on, and you come to find out, like, you play through the presets or whatever the first day, like, oh, okay, whatever. And then you go and you spend some time with it, and it's like, wow, this thing's actually capable of a whole lot more than I was expecting, and that's kind of a nice thing these days. I mean, that's happened. Like with my Summit, like I played it like, what the hell? Like I thought this thing was going to be a lot better, and then I started programming. I'm like, oh yeah, this sounds amazing.
Yeah,
this is awesome.
Yeah, that's Hydrosynth for me.
Yeah,
exactly.
A lot of
presets are awful to me, but yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, so when I had a Hydrosynth desktop first, and I kind of felt the same way. I was like, there's a few good ones in here, but I'll probably mostly be doing my own. And when I got the Deluxe, they added a lot of presets, and there's some that are the multis for the dual engine, and there's some actually really good presets in there now. And there's some people that did like CS80 style stuff on it.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. Like vintage sounding.
Yeah, there's a guy that did a whole like vintage sound bank for the Hydrosynth. It sounds excellent.
Well, I gotta say, for $5.99, the options are great between the Mini Freak and the Explorer. That's a whole lot of fun in two synthesizers. True. I mean, you consider, like, if you went out and you bought both of them for $1,200, the kind of stuff that you could do with both of those is pretty mind blowing.
Yeah,
that's very true.
And then, how much is the Korg, the analog Korg Minilog XD? How much is that one? That's around the same price, isn't it?
I would think so. I don't know though.
That's another like really cool like lower cost synth.
Yeah, Wagyu says the Argon and the Cobalt are around that price too, the smaller ones.
Yeah.
There's like a whole bunch of cool stuff like in that little price pocket. You know?
Yeah, that seems to be the most potent. Price point is like right in there.
Yeah,
$600 to $1,000, man. You can get some kick-ass things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Above that, it's sort of diminishing returns. It seems like a little bit.
Yeah. Well, should we move on to our topic?
Sure.
That was fun.
Why not? Absolutely.
Especially the rant on mod wheels.
Yeah, oh God, don't
get me started. Too late.
So, Tim brought us this topic, and I think it's a fantastic topic. I can't wait to talk about it. But it's about typecasting gear, and I don't know. Do you want to start us off, Tim? Like, what made you think of this?
Sure. Typecasting gear is something that I'm going to venture to guess that we all do to some extent. And I know that I'm guilty of it, and I noticed myself doing it. And then I stepped back, to try to realize what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and what is actually potentially good about doing that, and what is a waste of that piece of gear because I'm only thinking of it as capable of kind of doing one thing. Mm-hmm. So that's what made me think of the topic, is I just have caught myself doing it a lot, and I've seen others do it as well. So I thought we should throw this around the collective and see what everybody says. But I will jump in and say, right away that I think in some instances it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I won't say that it's a good thing all the time. I think mostly it's probably a negative, but it does also depend. I think it's funny because this feeds right back into the, are you a preset person, Are you a preset kind of synth player, or are you somebody that likes to tinker a lot? So if you're probably more of a preset player and just, tweak that and move and go, then you might be more of a person who would, typecast a piece of gear. And then obviously the other would connect if that's when you would tend to typecast it. But if you are somebody that gets under the hood and likes to mess with stuff, then you want to see, well, wait a minute, what happens if I, for instance, in my little Eurorec thing here, I have the make noise no coast. I hardly ever have used that for bass, but I have used it for bass. And it's more of a additive synth. It's really interesting. It's just a mono synth, but it can make some really interesting bass tones, and I had not used it that way for probably the first 6 to 8 months of its life, and then I realized you're only exploring sort of, the high end of this, the top end, just using it in a top end kind of way. And so I tried it for bass on a couple things, and it was surprisingly great. So I guess just as an overview for the topic, that's my thing, is that sometimes it's great to have a piece of gear that's dedicated and look, I'm just going to that. That's going to create my bass sound. This is going to create more of my chord area, and this is going to be my leads. And you kind of just know that's where I start. And then you make individual patches on those devices, on those pieces of gear, which is fine. And like in a lot of ways, it's quicker that way.
Yeah.
Because you just know this is going to do that. I know how this works for this. I know how it works for that. And so let's just keep them in that order. But that's what made me think of it, because gear can be so deep, and it's really only limited to your imagination typically, or largely.
Should we take a step back then and let's give some examples first before we take apart, like, is this good or bad, or how is it? What are some examples of typecasted gear? And let's open up. I mean, we've been talking about synthesizers mostly this show, but it can be for anything: guitars, drums, whatever.
Moog bass.
Moog bass. So yeah,
Moog
Paul
bass.
brought that up, and already, yeah, that would probably be a great place to start.
That's the classic, right?
I think almost every synth I have that has presets has some kind of Moog bass preset on there. So
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the ways that people think of it, like, what sounds better than Moog bass? Like, you immediately, if
Nothing.
you're not sure where you want to go, if you're not sure where you want to go with what the bass sound is, you'll just go, well, let me just kind of do a Moogie thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're off and running, and you're not hung up in, sound searching for a million hours.
Well, I was going to say, Tim, you were talking about how you got your typecast synths, and this one's going to do the bass, this one's going to do chords, this one's going to do whatever. You're building your band, your synth band, in doing that, and I think that's cool. So you got your best bass player, got your Moog bass, or lightly bass. I mean, somebody mentioned that earlier in the chat. The TX81Z lately bass. That's another good one. But that's like just one patch. So, and then you got your Juno for pads, right? Mm-hmm. And you're making your synth band. So that's cool.
Yeah. And you may choose, that may be your ultimate, and you may never choose to like move outside of that. Right? Like, and it's smart to know that. So that's why, to me, this is a fascinating topic, because it is smart to know what you hear in your head, that this piece of gear always gets me that, So let's start with that, and then you do your thing, and you go through them just like that, and you use the ones that hit it for you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just noticed personally,
and there are certain synths that definitely shine in certain areas.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And so you would typically, Marshall, just to use your examples, would you typically do Moog bass, Roland pad, and what for a lead?
What for a lead? I mean, the thing is, like, well, anything does pretty good leads.
Yeah,
So
that would be another one where it seems like Moog would be a popular choice. Like, oh
yeah,
yeah, bass and leads Moog. What? Let me ask you, Tim. Like, what about drums? Uh, does this kind of atmosphere exist in the drum world? Like, where you would pick a brand, like, oh, I'm going to be in a country band or I'm going to be in a metal band, and there are certain aspects of drums or certain brands that people tend to gravitate towards, like they do in the synth world.
Absolutely, it's a slightly different conversation, but for instance, for a number of years now, actually, it's been very popular for drummers to go back to the classic American brands, to go back to Gretsch, to go back to Slingerland, to go back to Ludwig. Especially in the 90s and in the early 2000s, that was not the case. The more innovative drum companies were getting the love at that point in time, and the smaller companies. But like, for instance, the one I'm with, Drum Workshop, super highly innovative and great drum company, but not thought of in any necessarily one way, except for now maybe like not cool. So I wouldn't say that drums get typecast too much, other than if you have like let's say you have an 8-inch deep snare, you're probably going to tune that low rather than tune it high. So you're, in a sense, you're typecasting that snare drum, right? It's going to be a thick, chunky, thuddy, awesome thing like that because of its depth, and it can do that.
Yeah.
But I don't really see it so much as being that otherwise, because the palette is, and it's several different pieces put together. So for me, it would be more like, I just notice when people sort of typecast the brands. So Drum Workshop now, in my opinion, it doesn't have the same cachet that it did. Even though it's just, I think they're the coolest drum company on the planet, it's still not saying, oh yeah, but dig this, I'm playing like this old Ludwig kit, or not even old, but like a new Ludwig kit or a new Slingerland kit or whatever. That's just like it's more of a trend thing at that point. So I don't know that I'm necessarily answering your question, but like usually those kind of instruments are purpose built, and you can't make a cymbal sound a bajillion different ways. If it has a character that's dry and not too attacky and sort of airy, then it might be great for like a singer-songwriter thing or a jazz situation.
Yeah.
But you're probably not going to use that in a metal situation. So
and
I hope, without getting too far off your question, I hope I'm
well, some of
it.
that's also like in how you mic the kit, right? As well, you can get different range of sounds out of it. Just from that.
But I mean, a cymbal kind of does a thing or it doesn't, or the drum sort of does a thing or it doesn't. Like you can't really get under the hood and change it all that much. Not the way you can a synth. Like, good Lord.
Or even a drum machine.
Right. Great example, actually. Yeah, there's limited amounts that you could kind of do with the tonal qualities of that. So I don't know that you would typecast it, but like you find your little individual drums or whatever, and then you're going to go, oh, this works great for that, I'll use it. But actually, it's so funny because with drums, I super typecast things, like exactly. Like I keep things pre-tuned up just to do whatever that thing is. Mm-hmm. Especially snare drums and kick drums. Do I want a 24-inch? I'm going for something bigger, a little floppier. Do I want something kind of funky but still low and tight? So I'll go with a 20-inch kick or something at that point. So it's interesting. That's a great, Chris, way of asking that question, because in that world, I think you're totally typecasting, and that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was wondering how much it was, because I was thinking like, how many metal bands do I see playing Gretsch drums? But
right.
you might see them play, I don't know, something else like Tama or DW or something. But right. There seems to be a little bit of that, but maybe not as much as the synth world.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I would say definitely. And again, it's just it's kind of interesting to think of how much variation there can be in a synthesizer, generally speaking,
Yeah.
that can allow you for it to be the kick drum or the snare drum or the cymbal, you know, where you can't really do that with actual kick drum, snare drums. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know for the guitar world, I would say it's at least as much as the synth world, and honestly, probably a little bit more, where gear gets typecast quite a bit. I've seen a few things change over the years, like more recently, as younger kids are getting into it, and they don't really care about what the boomers or even the Gen Xers are doing. So, like, some of that stuff gets broken.
Yeah.
But yeah, for a long time, and for most of the years playing guitar, you know, there would be very defined stereotypes like, no, you're not going to be playing the you know, double humbucker pointy guitar for country. Country has to be done with a Telecaster, you know, those kind of stereotypes. Friend that I got the Silvertone amp from had done some work for him, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. And so he's probably about 70 now, late 60s or so. And so he grew up and loved surf music, is probably a little bit younger than the first generation of surf musicians. But the surf world is really, really nuts about this stuff. Like, you can't play that thing or it's wrong. And so he fought a lot of that stuff, and for a while when his band was touring a lot, he came to me and he's like, "Hey, I got this reverb pedal. It was a little Electro-Harmonix Holy Grail, a digital reverb." And so that's anathema for surf music. I mean, surf music has to be done with a dedicated standalone Fender reverb tank, and then you got to go into something like a Showman head and separate cab, and you cannot vary from that. It has to be that, you know. Yeah. And he says even bringing a Fender Twin on the stage, like, they would give him dirty looks about it, and that's a classic Fender with spring reverb. And so he had this reverb pedal that he loved the sound of and that he thought worked really well with his music. And he couldn't bring it on stage because these old guys would give him so much crap about it. And so I took the circuit out of the pedal and made a custom housing for it. And he put a custom paint job on it, but I got it all wired up into this thing that nobody knew what it was. And so then he would have it on his pedal board, and nobody was the wiser about it, but it was something that was so, no, you cannot do that. There's these gatekeepers of like, no, that's the wrong way to do it. You cannot play surf with that.
It's like the Pepsi challenge, right? So everyone thinks they hate it, but if you cover up the labels, and no one cares.
Yeah, no one cares. That's my favorite part of that. Well,
those guys weren't going to give him crap because it was all of a sudden the label's gone. That says something right there, I think.
Cryss, so a lot of guitar player friends I have here in Nashville, a lot of them really like Paul Reed Smith, so the PRS guitars, but because they're really good at doing a lot of different things, apparently.
Yeah.
Me not being a guitar player, I can't really say that, but I would trust these guys. So you have one?
Yeah,
there it is. Yeah.
I've got a few of them.
So, like, that's one of those guitars, though, that some people look at when you start to get kind of snobbish about things, and it's not a Strat or a Tele or even a Jazzmaster or whatever. Like, that guitar, I guess, can really cop a lot of different vibes. I don't know what all, Les Paul, and anyway, like, so... But apparently it's kind of hard to get that sold. It doesn't look like an old beat up Tele when you pick it up.
Yeah.
And so that's weird, right? But that's stupid.
Yeah, it is stupid. And I remember, so I mean, a few years into playing guitar, I had already bought a hand-me-down guitar. I bought my first Strat, And then I felt like, well, I've got a single coil guitar, a Fender style that I love, but I really want a Gibson. And and then back in the day, PRS was hardly anywhere. I mean, they were super boutique, high end, like you barely saw them. And if you never saw anybody play one hardly, except for, guys like Santana. And I remember I found a place that had them, and I saved up and I bought my first one. And like I was the only person that anybody knew that had one, and it was such an interesting design guitar. And the first one I had bought was a Custom 22, for anybody that cares. And it's really kind of a hybrid between a Fender and a Gibson style guitar. I mean, it just like lands somewhere in the middle. And I think the problem that they had for a lot of years were from traditional people that are like, it can sound bright and jangly like a Fender, but it's not the Fender sound. And it can be big and fat like a Gibson, but it's not the Gibson sound. And so a lot of people would had a hard time accepting them because they were new. And then, and this is, I think he started making guitars in the 80s, and, I bought one in 94, 5 or so. And so still, but by the time that I bought him, unfortunately, the perspective had changed. That it's like, well, these are really nice guitars and they're really high end. But then the crazy thing was that at the end of the 90s, all of a sudden, nu metal came into vogue, and there are all these like nu metal guys that were buying Paul Reed Smith and not buying Fender or Gibson. And all of a sudden they became recognized for what the Paul Reed Smith sound is and what a Paul Reed Smith can do, rather than it being some sort of compromise between Fender and Gibson. And I never liked nu metal, but I was happy to at least see that Paul Reed Smith got the recognition, and now they're ubiquitous. I mean, you buy them, that they're one of the big name brand or well-known brands like Fender, Gibson, Gretsch, Taylor. I mean, they're counted among those now as their own entity, and not people are not judging them by what they're not. And so I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Marshall, I have a question for you, because before the show we were talking about the 303.
Oh yeah.
In what ways have you used it that was not just bass driven?
Well, I don't really use it for bass specifically. I will use it as like a mid thing.
Okay.
Thing. Yeah, because the cool thing that you can do with the 303 is you can get it to squeak and squelch and all that stuff. You can do bass with it, and I know that it can sound okay, but I like to really tweak on the cutoff on those and get them squawking pretty good. So I don't tend to use them as bass, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. That's why I was just curious, because I've never even owned one, but I mean, on the surface, that seems to be its revered application.
Yeah, and I've never owned a real one. I've had pretty much all the Roland reissue versions, starting with the Era series, the TB3, and then the TB03, the boutique version.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got those, and I've got the Behringer ones. And honestly, the Behringer ones sound way better.
That's amazing.
They do. They said that's one of the clones that they did that I feel like they did a really good job with those. So it's sad, because I'm like, Roland could have done that. They could have done it years ago. Nope. Give us this digital crap. It just doesn't sound the same. I don't know why, but it does not. Yeah. It doesn't have that quality to. It just, yeah, it's sad.
I actually use the Roland Cloud 303 plugin for its sequencer stuff, and then I pipe the MIDI out to the Behringer and record that back in, for the same reason. Like, well, I don't want to sit here and program this crappy workflow of hardware that it has. I can't be bothered. But I'll do it on the computer screen. But I'd rather have the sound from the Behringer than the plug-in.
You do even more than I do, because when I use the 303, I'll either sequence it with an arpeggiator or I'll just sequence it in the piano roll, the MIDI piano roll. So I don't even use their sequencer crap. Yeah.
You know, there was a song talking about the 303 in other contexts that I thought was so clever. Oh man, I'm forgetting what the channel name is, but the guy is Pontus Hag.
Oh, you're talking about the Bad Gear guy? Is that the same guy?
No, so it's I think, was he Swedish? That he's got like a really incredible like vintage synth collection.
Mr. Firechild.
That's Firechild. Yes, that's it. He did a video with the 303. Yeah, with the 303 not doing acid, and was just used as a synthesizer for the different tones on that. And I thought that was really cool of him to do that, because that is undoubtedly one of the most typecasted piece of gear, and it was really great to hear that in another context. And I've been meaning to try to do some of that myself, but just haven't had the time to.
Well, the funny thing about the 303 is it wasn't designed originally to be what it's become and what it's synonymous for now.
And that's that makes that even that's even more interesting, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and I think that's cool. That's one of the cool things about the 303 is people bought these things in pawn shops because no one wanted them as a standalone computer bass man, right? But these guys started getting them and started tweaking them and doing all kinds of weird stuff with them. And then even on top of that, you got the guys doing the Devilfish mods and all that stuff. They started modding these things. So it took this little thing that for its original purpose, no one wanted it for. But once people figured out what it was good at, then everyone wanted it. You know?
Can I show one of those examples of it being used? The coolest person to ever use a 303, without a doubt. Here, let's see here. How do I? All right, here we go. Bam.
Townsend. Townsend. Okay. That's amazing, though. Yeah. Well, he was somebody thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
Well, should we talk about? Would it be interesting as we're continuing and getting more towards the end of the show? But would it be interesting for each of us to talk about ways that we, the gear that we do typecast, and the ways that that's successful, and then in the ways that we have like not done that and successes we've had, and maybe what those pieces of gear are. I know it'll take a second probably for all of us to think of it, because we don't walk around and archive that sort of thing.
I've got some. I can start.
Well, kick us off, man. Yeah.
So the JP8000 is my typecast synth for super saws. It's the best one ever, in my opinion. So for trance, I love it for that. So it's definitely in my book. That's a typecast synth. Then you have like the JD800, which is really good at pads, like really good at nice atmospheric, cool digital pads. I think it's, I don't know. It's very unique. I think the JD800 in that regard. Trying to think what else. Obviously Moog bass, mini Moog. Same with the fatties are really good for bass and really good for distorted bass.
Interesting.
You can overdrive those things, and I want to say they've got. I can't remember. It's been a while since I played with those, but I think they have a distortion circuit built into those, and they can get real dirty and grungy, and they sound really cool. But that's what I like those for. So when I was doing a lot of electro house in like 07, I really liked the little fatties for that, for bass for those. So there's some typecasting there, I think. But they can do more, obviously. One thing that surprised me was the Sub 37. I have made some really cool sounds on that you wouldn't know were from that synth.
Yeah.
At all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty versatile, especially for a mono synth. I like to use it for making like risers and sweeps, like effects transition effects for tracks and stuff. I've used it quite a bit for stuff like that. Yeah.
Wow, it is. Yeah, what a versatile synth that is for a mono synth. It is
Yeah.
just, and it's not complicated,
No. That's
but but it's got so much depth. Yeah, I did some that little Dr. Capra Halloween track I did, and there's a little moment where there's a lead break in it. I don't have it pulled up or anything, but just you're saying this reminds me. And I did a lead break in it, and the whatever that patch was that I wrote into the subsequent 37 was unlike anything I'd ever gotten out of it before. And I knew I wanted it to be like freaky, and so I just started like going for that, and it delivered. So like to your point, man, crazy, like how much it can be more than just what you think of it as.
Yeah, so that one's I would say that's one that's hard to typecast because it's really good at a lot of different things. The Sub 37.
Yeah. So those are your basic go-tos, and
yeah, those are some of the ones that, like, when I think about typecasting, like those are ones that in my brain pop out right away.
Yeah, for sure. Any breakthrough moments about when you were like, just completely getting something that blew your mind and you didn't think you could get the device to do that? Have any moment of that?
Yeah, actually, it was with the Kyra. So when I was working with the Kyra when I first got it, I wrote a track called Maximum Effort, and it's all Kyra except for like the percussion and like one little effect thingy that I did in Omnisphere. And I was pretty surprised. But the thing that surprised me the most that's unique to that synth compared to anything else is you can get that thing. You can crank the high end. It's got a little EQ in there, so you can crank the high end all the way up, and open the filter all the way up, and do like a super saw type sound, and it does not break up at all. There's like zero aliasing in that high end. It sounds beautiful, and it was completely unexpected.
Wow, yeah.
And that's why when I say like that synth is really cool for stuff, like that's what I mean. Like it's pristine in a way that nothing else in my studio is. So that was and you got, like, when I got it, I was like, oh yeah, this might be kind of like a virus. It's not really like a virus at all. It's got a little bit of crossover in certain ways, but it's also limited in others. But the real thing to me, the real selling point of that thing is it's multi-timbral, so you can stack all kinds of patches together and make just massive sounds, like multi-patch sounds. It streams all over USB. Anyway, like it's a cool thing. So that was one that like really kind of blew my mind, and just hearing it and the results I've gotten with it, I think, speak for themselves. So that's one time when I was actually really surprised.
Cryss, you want to do your lineups?
Yeah, so some of the things that I would use, maybe, in ways that they're not thought to be used anyway, less commonly, I guess. I've gotten some great results. Let me start with a couple of guitar examples, and I'll do a couple synth examples. So if we're playing heavier stuff, I mean, typically you'd go to, a bridge humbucker of solid body guitar, and, the Cryss Smith or an SG, or, some of the guitars like that really have that sound, and it's great. But sometimes to give a heavier rhythm sound a little more definition, the thing that had never been done in the 80s would be to play a single coil guitar into high gain, but it can give it a certain tightness and cut through that when it's mixed with the heavier guitars, it sounds really good. So my Telecaster sounds amazing. It's a great clean guitar. I use it a lot in places where I would expect to do a Strat neck pickup solo, and I'll use my Tele with a mini humbucker in the neck, and it's there. But using that bridge pickup into some high gain just sounds really killer. and it's not really what you would normally think of to go for high gain. And on the other side of that, guitar that I have out that I use a lot is my Kiesel 7-string, and these are like kind of high-end metal guitars, but they're really well made. They're beautiful, beautiful works of art. This has got a fanned fretboard, so you can see that the frets are they're parallel about right here, and then you can see that they fan out in either direction. So it's a multi-scale.
That's very cool.
Ultra flat radius. I mean, this thing, 2 humbuckers. It just screams, modern metal kind of vibe, and the 7 strings low and it's heavy, but actually it doesn't have super high output pickups, and it has a great clean tone. There's times where I'm just looking for a certain lightly overdriven tone that I can get it from that guitar, which it's not the first guitar that I would think of for those kind of sounds. I'd normally be thinking Strat or my Gretsch or something, but there are times where that just really does it, and it's like the most ridiculous metal guitar that I have. So it's kind of fun to, between the Tele and the Kiesel, to swap them around and have one perform the other's role, and you can get some good results out of that. And as far as synthesizers, I think if you go into something with stereotypes, it can direct you to some really wonderful places, as you've been mentioning, Tim. But also, there's always that opportunity to find places that are not so tread upon. And I was finding that. So, I've got this borrowed OBX8 here, and here's another. I put Eddie Van Halen with his OBX8 on the thumbnail because it's a very typecasted sound. That, like, what's the Oberheim Poly sound, and everybody's like EVH and Prince, and there's a lot of other people, Geddy Lee, that have had that sound. And so when you go and you sit and play it, like, I mean, the first time, Andy Synthatic and I were at the NAMM show, and we got our headphones and played on the OBX8 there. And of course, one of the most gratifying things is to hit that low E and hear the Tom Sawyer filter sweeps just kind of go across there. And it's beautiful. Or to play something that sounds like, those great saw waves of like 1984 or something. Like, it does those things so well. And so the fun has been for me to sit and use it's very limited compared to something like the Moog One or a Hydrasynth or whatever. It just can't touch the versatility of those things, but it does have some modulation and some cross mod things. And when you start playing with the few features it does have, and you try to push it to get all that you can out of it, it delivers some really interesting sounds because the sound engine's so good already. And so yesterday I'd been making some patches, and I made the sound that was like, it was so uncharacteristically not Oberheim at all, but it sounded so amazing, beautiful, and it was like, it was chaos, but a beautiful chaos, and it's something that I did not expect to get out of the synthesizer. And so that's kind of one of the fun things that, like, if you are a person that likes to tinker, as it was said earlier in the show, with synthesizers and gear, like, you can find things that you're not supposed to find that sound really good. And Wagyu mentioned earlier, like, the CS80 is, nobody can say that without then talking about Vangelis and, all of his great work, Blade Runner and Chariots of Fire. And I had listened to Antarctica earlier today on a walk, and just those beautiful sounds. And I had been sitting and playing with the version 4 of the Arturia CS80, and it sounds amazing. And I decided, like, well, I'm going to sit and program some sounds with it. And, you want to start steering towards Blade Runner or something. And, like, well, let me see what else this thing can do. And to really be able to find its character and some interesting sounds without it being the very well-known stereotypical sounds that we always hear from it or from demos. That it's a really beautiful sounding synth. It's a very maybe slightly unconventional, and its sound is not so much like, when you listen to an OBX or OBXA and you listen to a Jupiter and a Prophet 5, like they're not so far away from one another. And that's a synth that has definitely its own characteristic. And so it's been fun to program some stuff that I would not normally think of for the CS80 sound. Oh, what about you, Tim?
Well, yeah, I think it's just interesting to hear what you guys do and what the go-to things are, what you do typecast, and then the things that you haven't. So, yeah, same for me along those lines. Typecasting for me definitely is going to jump to probably Moog for bass. So I'll just sort of do it in that same sort of way that we've been talking. But I like the Mother 32 for all its kind of limitations, although it's semi-modular, can make some really satisfying bass tones. So a lot of times in like the synth jams I've been doing over the past couple of years, I'll use it for bass. In fact, it sort of became my typecast thing to use it for bass because I found the other instruments were capable of so much more that I sort of hated to. I don't know if relegate is the right word, but you know what I mean. Like if they were capable of much more complex timbres than something that needed to just sit in there and be fat and solid like a great bass sound, then I kind of started going, man, Mother 32 sounds really good, and then that frees up my other synths to do other things. Including the subsequent, and like talking about that one particular patch I found and made. So yeah, Moog is going to probably be bass. Also, the OB6 has some really great bass sounds. Like it can be right next to it to me a lot of times. And now that I have the X8, I like to explore it a bit more as a go-to almost bass thing. But if you're doing something that's live and you're using up that synth to fulfill rather a role, I'm going to be a little reluctant to use the X8 for a great unison bass sound or something. You know what I mean? Like when it could do so many other things, I would be tempted not. But so yeah, I would say Moog is usually going to be the go-to bass thing. I mean, and there it is. There's the typecast part of it that's both solid as a choice and immediately limiting, right? And then really for like pads and whatnot, I kind of wish I had some piece of Roland gear for pads, because I'm with Marshall on that. Man, that can sound amazing. But for me, it's been the Moog Matriarch will typically be my mid-frequency love.
Yeah.
But it has such great characteristics in the mid-range, and you can do so many interesting things with it, and the limitation of it being paraphonic makes chordal things more interesting rather than just a straight-up poly where you just know every note's going to sound, it's going to sound the same way. There's a quirkiness that happens. So that's become that I love. Like, it's just incredibly interesting. So that's kind of become my more chordal area, would be the Matriarch. And then lead-wise, I tend to use this No Coast because it's got, I mean, number one, it's additive, so it's different sounding than a subtractive synth. So it sits on top of everything differently. And so I really like the way that it does what it does. And also it has it's a full synth voice. That's the other thing about it that's fun. For a Eurorack piece, it's a full synth voice. So I can really get some unusual and interesting tones out of it. And that's kind of what I want for a lead sound. Generally speaking, that's what we're talking here, typecasting. Yeah, I'll go to that and see what I can make happen. If not, obviously, I think we're all sort of agreeing that maybe a lead sound can kind of come from anywhere, because it doesn't have to sit in a really big fat way as a bass that could possibly also just destroy everything else. You know, like it's interesting how you relegate things, but that would be mine. Would probably be that no coast, just because it's so much fun and it has so much modulation ability just within itself. That's really fun, and the tone is different, so it sits on top of the other analog stuff a little bit differently. Those are my typecasts. And then to flip it, to use the no coast as a bass voice was really, really fun and really, really different, and it could be really fat, but it's going to demand more attention, probably just because I like to modulate it more. I mean, it has more possibilities in that way, so it immediately kind of has taken me down a different road, which is like, that's why you'd want to do that. So what does that mean when that's on the bottom, and maybe a lot more of the movement is actually on the bottom instead of in the center or top, right? Like that kind of brought that up for me, is like, well, all right. And not to do wobble bass or something like cliche like that, but like you can just get it to do some very unusual things that then, depending on how you construct your piece, right? Like, but if that's on the bottom, then it's already telling you, well, this can't be absolutely too wild in order for it to not obscure what the bass is doing, you know. You know, it's true, like the way you would construct your tones and assemble them. So yeah, no coast for bass, really, really unusual. Like, I don't know, for mid-range stuff, I mean, I think sometimes to not use chords, and in Eurorack I have Morphagene, I have Instruo Arbor, and then I just got also Instruo Lubot. So being that we're not typecasting these, I'm trying to, they will sit in the middle as chords without actually being chords. They're kind of granular tape, like Morphagene is sort of granular and tape based feeling, so you can really fill up the middle range with that, and then have bass, and then obviously have a lead on top of that. So I'm experimenting more with that, you know, just to check that out. That's like not using actual chords, but sort of more sort of weirdly generated pads from those.
Yeah.
Because they end up being pads. They take up a lot of space. And then, yeah, lead-wise, what have I done that was like totally unexpected? I mean, definitely this subsequent 37 example I used earlier. Don't know. I can't really think of anything lead-wise that was too like crazy other than that one. But DFAM can do some things that can be leads. And if you modulate the VCA and kind of get some randomization to it, since it's just an 8-step sequencer on its own, you can actually kind of do almost like drum solo-y things. So I had done I did a jam where it became more of a drum solo thing. That's not the way I was typically using it. Like it literally becomes a little feature in this jam where it's like a drum solo. And while you think of it as like sort of a synth and drum machine, but I kind of would just like put it in that role. So that was fun, and like it worked out great. Like I was really surprised actually how cool it sounded by using like a square wave to modulate the VCA. So it's just kind of hitting in and out. Like it played this really cool solo.
Awesome. Well, guys, I guess we should probably call it to a close. And trying to think if there's any last thoughts, anything we need to put in there. But I guess, again, we don't put a lot of attention on it. But if you enjoy the show, do all the stuff and all that. And if you want to join us in the Facebook group, there's activity happening during the week and discussions and things, and we love those and like to keep that rolling. So you can join us. There are links in the discussion box below, so come check us out. And until next week, everyone have a good night.
Okay then. Bye.